Welcome to day 20 of the Azure Advent Calendar. Many thanks to Gregor and Richard for organising this wonderful event. I've learned an awful lot over the last 19 days, and hopefully you will continue to learn both from today and from the next 4 or 5 days coming up. My name's Ed Baker. I'm an MCT regional lead for the United Kingdom, and I'm an Enterprise Mobility MVP, which of course covers Azure Active Directory, Intune and Azure Information Protection, among other products. Today I'd like to talk to you about Azure Active Directory Conditional Access. I'm going to do a short presentation, some demonstrations, and see where we go from there. So what is conditional access? The modern security perimeter now extends beyond most organizations' network to include user and device identity. Organizations can utilize the identity signals produced as part of this as part of their access control decisions. Conditional access in Azure Active Directory is the tool used to bring signals together to make decisions and enforce organizational policies. Conditional access is at the heart of the new identity-driven control plane. If you've been to any Microsoft presentations around Azure Active Directory recently, you will have heard that identity is the new control plane. Conditional access policies, at their simplest, are if-then statements. If a user wants to access resource A, then they must complete action B. As an example, a payroll manager wants to access the payroll application and is required to perform multi-factor authentication to access that application. In this modern cloud-first world, administrators are faced with two primary goals: empower users to be productive wherever and whenever, and protect the organization's assets. By using conditional access policies, you can apply the right access controls when needed to keep your organization secure and stay out of your users' way when not needed. Conditional access policies are enforced after the first factor authentication has been completed. Conditional access is not intended as an organization's first line of defense for scenarios like denial of service attacks, but can use signals from these events to determine what access a user or sign-in can have. So what can I control with conditional access? The common signals that conditional access can take into account when making policy decisions include the following signals: user or group membership, so policies can be targeted to specific users and groups, giving administrators fine-grained control over access. IP location information. Organizations can create trusted IP address ranges that can be used when making policy decisions, and administrators can specify entire countries to block or allow traffic from. Your device. Users with devices of specific platforms or marked with a specific state can be used when enforcing conditional access policies. As an example, compliance policies within Intune. Applications. Users attempting to access specific applications can trigger different conditional access policies. Real-time and calculated risk detection. Signals integrated with Azure Active Directory Protection allows conditional access policies to identify risky sign-in behavior. Policies can then force users to perform password changes or multi-factor authentication to reduce their risk level, or be blocked from access until an administrator takes some form of manual action. And Microsoft Cloud App Security. Microsoft Cloud App Security enables user application access and sessions to be monitored and controlled in real time, increasing visibility and control over access and activities performed within your cloud environment. So that's what we control, but what decisions can I make? Well, at the core I have two decisions. I can block access, which is the most restrictive decision, or I can grant access, which is obviously the least restrictive decision, but within grant access I can still require one or more of the following options: multi-factor authentication, device to be marked as compliant, hybrid Azure AD join device, which means an Azure Active Directory joined device that is also joined to a Windows Active Directory domain services domain. I can require a specifically approved client application to be used, or I can require an Intune application protection policy to be enforced. Sort of common policies we can use for this service. I can require multi-factor authentication for users with administrative roles. So many organizations have common access concerns, and we can help with lots of these. Requiring multi-factor authentication for any form of Azure management task. Blocking sign-ins for users attempting to use legacy authentication protocols. And requiring trusted locations for Azure multi-factor authentication registration. Blocking or granting access from specific locations, and the demonstration you'll see shortly will show an example of that. Blocking risky sign-in behaviours. Has my credential been sold? Am I signing in from a new IP address from a new ISP in a new country? And requiring organisation managed devices for specific applications. So for key line of business applications, I may require the device to be under MDM management or enrolled into Intune management. So how do we apply these conditional access policies? Well, once we've created the policies and assigned it to an individual user or group, all policies are then enforced in two phases. We can have more than one conditional access policy when you access a cloud app. If that is the case, all policies that apply must be satisfied. For example, if one policy requires MFA and the second requires a compliant device, you must go through MFA and you must require a compliant device. It's not an either-or situation. All policies are enforced in two phases. In the first phase, all policies are evaluated and all access controls that aren't satisfied are collected. In the second phase, you're prompted to satisfy the requirements you haven't met. If any one of those policies blocks access, you are blocked and not prompted to satisfy any other policy controls. If none of the policies block you, you are prompted to satisfy other policy controls in the following order. Require MFA, require device compliance, require hybrid Azure AD joined device, require approved client apps, require app protection policy. Then we have external MFA providers and terms of use. And you'll see terms of use in a demonstration a little later. So how are these assignments evaluated? All assignments are logically ANDed. If you have more than one assignment configured, all assignments must be satisfied to trigger a policy. If you need to configure a location condition that applies to all connections made from outside your organization's network, include all locations and exclude all trusted IPs. What do you do if you are locked out of the Azure AD admin portal? Well, if you are locked out of the Azure AD portal due to an incorrect setting in one of your conditional access policies, you need to check there are other administrators in your organization that aren't blocked yet. An administrator with access to the Azure portal can disable the policy that is impacting your sign-in. If none of the administrators in your organization can update the policy, you need to submit a support request. Microsoft Support can review and update conditional access policies that are preventing access. And you'll see when I do demonstrations a little later that there is always an exclude option for one or more roles or users in every policy, to make sure that somebody can always get in. Indeed, the product will warn you every time you set a policy for a wide-ranging number of users that you could potentially lock yourself out. So now to the demonstrations. I'm going to do a demonstration of named locations, how you can set them up and what they are. Then I'm going to do a conditional access policy that allows access, a conditional access policy that blocks access, and a conditional access policy that includes a specific terms of use that you need a user to sign or agree to before they are allowed access. Let's dive in and do some demonstrations. So you join me at the Azure Active Directory Admin Center for my demo tenant, Contoso Demo. This tenant has an Azure Active Directory Premium P2 license. Conditional access, you only require a P1 license. Now you can achieve that either by buying the P1 license direct for Azure Active Directory, or you can purchase Enterprise Mobility and Security, which would give you extra features as well, as I've mentioned, Intune and Azure Information Protection at P1 level for the E3 SKU. If you want more features, you can also buy the E5 Enterprise Mobility SKU, which will give you Cloud App Security and the P2 level of Azure Active Directory and the P2 level of Azure Information Protection. Here we've got a full tenant. It's a Microsoft 365 demonstration tenant. So I'm going to click on Azure Active Directory here, and you can see I've got the Azure Active Directory Blade with all of the items down here. I'm going to go to the security section, which is where conditional access lives. And you can see under conditional access, I've got named locations down here under manage, MFA, authentication methods, and I've got some areas from ID protection, which is another P2 feature, risky users and risky sign-ins. Let's have a tour around conditional access first. So conditional access gives me a number of baseline policies built in. However, these are disappearing at the end of February next year, so February the 29th, 2020. The baseline policies, so require MFA for admins, end user protection, legacy authentication, and MFA for service management are going away. You'll have to create your own conditional access policies if you wish to use those. The first thing I want to demonstrate for you is named locations. Now note this is not called trusted locations. So if I click on named locations, you can see I have three here. I have Contoso head office, I have blocked countries, and I have Birmingham. Notice I can also configure multi-factor authentication trusted IPs. And when you use conditional access policies, you can use those IP addresses, known as trusted IP addresses, direct from multi-factor authentication. I'm not going to use those. I'm going to use named locations. Using named locations allows me to use them as trusted or not trusted, depending on the policy I create. So if I look at the Contoso head office location here, I've picked an IP range and I've picked two IP ranges here, just random IP ranges. And I've marked it as trusted. I've got Birmingham here and I've picked another address range and I've marked this as not a trusted location. So this is just a location I could either include or exclude if I wanted to. And I've also chosen blocked countries. So I've created a new one called blocked countries. I've said countries and regions, and it will list for me all these countries and regions. Now I have chosen to include here Russia, North Korea, and China, because I absolutely know that none of my devices, none of my users are going to be requiring access to work resources from North Korea, China or Russia. We don't operate in those areas and we don't have people that live in those areas. So I'm not trusting those. I've also included any addresses that come up as not being able to be mapped, because that could be spoofing that location. So I'm going to save that as well. So I have those locations available to me. I'm also going to demonstrate the terms of use. So I can create a new terms of use. Here I've created one called Head Office Users. It's available in English language. I've turned various settings off and I've created a PDF with my conditions of I want them to sign up to when they use my service. So that if I enable that in a conditional access policy, they will have to accept that before they can use the features or access my resources. Let's go and have a look at conditional access policies. If I go into conditional access, remember it says baseline disappears. I'm going to create myself a policy in a second, but I want to show you the Contoso head office policy. I've got assignments and I've got access controls. Under assignments, I've got users and groups, cloud apps and conditions. So I apply the users, the cloud apps, and conditions as an assignment, I then give access through either session controls or grant or deny access. So let's have a look what I've done here. I've created one for all users and I haven't excluded anybody. This is not best practice in my terms because I could potentially lock myself out, which is what this tells me here. I could do it just for guests, directory roles, so I could say all administrative roles or all global admins, and then a subset of users and groups. So I'm going to go ahead in here into exclude, and I'm going to exclude a specific role, and I'm going to exclude my global administrators because I know they only ever sign in as global administrators from inside the organization and wired in, so conditional access is less relevant to them than it is to my salespeople and my remote workers. My global admin users are likely to have devices that are wired in, therefore they're compliant and they're coming from a location I know. So I then choose my cloud apps. I'm going to choose all cloud apps here, which again could lock me out of every application, so be aware of that. And user actions, I could, instead of doing this for applications, could do this for my registering my security information, which is the information I would need to be able to register for MFA or self-service password reset, any of that type of information there. And I can then have conditions. This is where we start getting down to the nitty-gritty of our conditional access policy. So sign-in risk, high, medium, low or no risk. I can set a specific policy for each type. Those risks are applied by Microsoft using their machine learning and artificial intelligence based on their edge protection for whether the device is used or whether the device or the sign-in is coming from a known IP address or an unknown IP address or a new location based on unusual sign-ins for those users. And it will assign a risk. I'm not applying risk to this policy. I'm then saying what platforms is this going to apply to? I haven't configured it, but if I configure it, I can apply it to just Windows. Sadly, no more Windows phones, but while they're still out there, we can use it. Mac OS, Windows, so I can have an individual policy for access from each device, and of course I can exclude a type of device as well. So I'm going to choose not configured, which is effectively the same as saying any device. And then locations. So here I have picked selected locations. If I click on here, you can see that I have the opportunity to pick all my locations, including anything I have set up in MFA as a trusted IP address. So I've just said head office, as this is the head office policy. Client apps I've included, as well as my cloud apps, I've included browsers, mobile apps and desktop clients, modern authentication clients, and my Exchange Active Syncs clients, and all other clients. So Office clients, older Office clients, and older mail protocols that I want to be covered. I haven't configured device state, but I could configure device state, include all device states in the policy, or just compliant, or whether it's hybrid Azure AD joined, which, as I've mentioned, is Azure AD joined and Active Directory domain joined. But I'm not going to configure that either. So I'm pretty much done with my assignments. I now want to cover access. So this is head office. I really do want people to connect from head office, so I'm going to grant access. And this is where I get the choice of saying require multi-factor authentication, require device to be marked as compliant, require all this stuff that we went through in the presentation deck. And I can be quite mean because I can say require all of them or just require one. And this bottom one here is my terms of use for head office users, which means that they will have to comply with the head office users information before they get access to the system. And if I want to use session controls, I can use session controls with Cloud App Security to control what happens in the usage of a particular online session. So this policy is complete. I also have block locations, so this is one that blocks people. So it's all users. Again, I've excluded the mod administrator from this because I don't want everybody blocked out. I've chosen all my apps. I've chosen one location, which is blocked countries, and I've just said straight block access. So this policy will not allow anybody from those three locations, China, North Korea or Russia, or any location that is unknown, to sign in. Now let's go and demonstrate the head office policy in action. Sign out and then sign in. Immediately when I sign in as that user, I get Contoso Head Office Terms of Use. Do I decline or accept? If I click on it, it will take me to that Terms of Use, which I've uploaded. And once I've zoomed in and checked it and done everything else, I can force them to do that before I click accept, which means that button won't be active. And then I click accept, which means that before I can gain access to any of their systems in Contoso, I have said, yes, I will comply with that. So whereas you can do that normally when you enroll with an Intune device, this is not an Intune device, this is signing in from a web app anywhere. I can still force acceptance to those policies. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride on a conditional access sleigh. Hey! Thank you very much for tuning in to the Azure Advent Calendar today, 20th of December, to learn about Azure Active Directory Conditional Access. I hope you've enjoyed the short video. There will be an allied blog on my ed-baker.com blog site as soon as I'm able to write it. Wishing you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.